We are starting in a minute while Firoz is setting up the host. Good afternoon, Ranjit. Your mic is on, Ranjit. You can mute it if you want.
Sir, you are host now.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Firoz. If you want to leave, you can go.
Oh,
Okay, okay. Let's start. We are taking up another sociological topic on social stratification. These topics become interesting and necessary to be able to understand the whole aspect of migration and diaspora. In fact, the whole aspect of migration and diaspora itself is has changed tremendously since the earliest times when diaspora was defined in purely Jewish terms. So the whole concept of diaspora is changing. I was reading in somewhere yesterday that Dubai is now introducing long-term gaming visas, where if you are a performing artist, you are a visual artist, you are a gamer, you develop games, you can now get a gaming with a long-term gaming visa by Dubai. So obviously, a lot of factors come into the picture that today the mobility in terms of the kind of work which is happening, uh, a whole lot of this work can be done virtually, but the fact is how states are looking at defining migration, the whole concept of migration it's changing, then the whole concept of diaspora is changing. And in all these sociological concepts still come in. So let's look at social stratification. Hang on. Are you able to see the slide and hear my voice? Are you able to see the slide? Okay.
Yes,
Uh,
sir. Yes, sir.
okay, perfect. Now I'm moving the slide. Please just tell me whether the slide moved. I have brought in the objective page. Has the slide moved on the screen?
No movement, sir.
Okay, okay, fine. So let me, I think this goes through this protocol of letting me. Okay, now can you see the objectives page?
Yes, subjective, sir. It's clear.
Perfect, perfect, perfect. So let's look at the object. And if we look at the nature around, natural systems themselves are in stratified, are in layers, soil, rocks, you see forces. Most of the natural system work in in a stratification system in layers. Stratification defined is defined as layers. Similarly, human society is stratified across the world. All societies are stratified. Indian society becomes an addition. There is an additional dimension, typically of caste, which is not there in other society. There are different dimensions, but Indian society works in an additional dimension of caste. So let's understand meaning and concept dimensions of stratification, Indian social structures, relationships, patterns of immigration. If we look at the smallest institution or the smallest unit, which is the family, you see the family is also stratified in terms of, uh, and we will also define how do we define stratification. You will see the family is also stratified in ways. So Raymond Murray defines social stratification as a horizontal division of society into higher and lower social units. Tumin refers to as an arrangement of any social group into a hierarchy of position. See, more often than not, whenever there are more than one individuals, there is a hierarchy that are unequal with regard to power, property, social evaluation, or social gratification. A system of hierarchical position of individuals that may be advantages and disadvantages to them in terms of social rewards. Everybody is positioned in the society with respect to their position, how the society perceives them, and the social rewards they get. That's how stratification comes about. Are you able to see my slides move on your screen? Are the slides moving on your screen?
Yes,
So
Dr. Abhay.
yes, they are moving.
Okay, perfect, perfect. I just wanted to check it once more. It is used as an empirical distribution of resources. Remember, there are set fixed resources in a society. Some groups have more excess, others have limited or no excess, which creates inequality. So stratification is caused by this unequal distribution of resources and causes this unequal distribution of resources. Social inequality perpetuates in the distribution of resources. Systems are both a cause and consequences of this inequality. It is a thing across societies, across countries, across nations, across any society. Even in animal societies, you will see there is some sort of a stratification which happens. Three kinds of resources that are fundamentally valued: power, prestige, and property. Unequally distributed among individuals. These three P's form the basis of divisions of society and categorization of people: power, prestige, property. Everything works around these three P's. So sociologist Max Weber, upon the three different ways of ranking, which includes class, status, power. Weber looked at it from a class point of view. That's where I said the Indian society becomes much more interesting from a sociological point of view with the introduction of caste as another factor of stratification. And caste and class work in different ways. So while caste works on ritual purity, class works on wealth purity in terms of wealth hierarchy. Differentiates between class and status. Class is an economic category, product of market situation. Status is a reflection of social order based on honor and practice. So while in the Varna system, the Brahmins would be kept at the top of the social prestige, there's a possibility that in the class system, they might be at the lowest position, poor Brahmins. Similarly, the lower caste could be lower in terms of prestige, but higher in terms of class, in terms of the wealth they have. Status is determined by the social prestige one enjoys. So, in fact, with modernization, with westernization, and with class system, there was another set of stratification which came and started challenging the caste system, because the initial caste system was a specific case of ritual purity in terms of defining a hierarchy. The class came and started challenging that. Socioeconomic status is a construct used by social scientists to measure social ranks. In the social stratification, namely power, prestige, indicators to measure determine socioeconomic status include income, occupational rank, education, etc. More often than not, you go to a party, you would like to know what the other person is doing. Based on that doing, you are trying to determine the position in terms of their, you determine the occupation, you determine the company, you determine the wealth, and then you also ask the surname to determine the caste. That's how the positioning happens. Another important area of social division is gender. Gender divisions pervade in almost all known societies. So there is a certain amount of ranking with respect to gender. So for example, there's been a lot of discussion in terms of how many women constitute CEOs of Fortune 500 companies. How does a woman progress in a workplace with his men? Why is that a lot of political power is in the hands of men and not of women? There is a certain amount of stratification in that. Indian social system unique compared to many societies due to the presence of caste. In addition to this, India has also, in terms of class, status, India then becomes much more complicated and diverse. And inevitably, in all our talk over the last so many weeks, in terms of so many units, there has been this discussion about when we talk about other countries and other, diasporas, why India or Indian state or Indian diaspora does this. And more often than not, the thing is the huge numbers which India as a country has, the diversity which India has. As I said, a small state like Haryana, from where I come in, which is 250 kilometers end to end, you should see the kind of diversity in terms of culture, in terms of caste, in terms of class, and so on and so forth. Caste system is known for its specific social religious mode of segmentation based on the Varna system in the Hindu religion. And in fact, we have also seen in the caste unit that even though caste is a very Hindu religious thing, but caste has permeated into other religions in India and the other parts of the subcontinent. Thousands of castes as jatis. I just hope. Okay, in case there is anybody new in the class today, remember the rules remain the same. You can stop me at any moment of time to ask a question or to add something which I have not covered or you think you want to share with people. So it's much more of a sharing, and also there is nothing right or wrong about anything that we talk about. These are perspectives. More often than not, if I define a system, I'm going to name the person who has defined it. Definitions are also ideologically aligned. So need to understand all that. In the system of stratification, caste functions as a central principle in all aspects, namely economy, polity, religion, and culture. We've seen there is a general elections going on. You should see the analysis of constituencies with respect to caste. Caste becomes a central factor, in spite of the fact that a whole lot of commentators are talking about the fact that caste no longer is a central theme in India. India has moved. Caste still seems to remain a central theme, especially when elections come in. So inevitably, it is a central theme. Some of the basic characteristics of caste system: membership by birth, hierarchy, hereditary occupation, pollution. Caste is basically the pollution and purity. Ascribed to different castes, endogamy, commensality, means whom can you eat, whom can you not eat with, whose household you can drink water, you don't drink water, and unique culture. Society has always been in terms of jatis, which are birth groups, which are not based on any specific religions. Jatis have been endogamous social groups. So any person who has not read sociology and wants to read a little bit more of caste, it's an extremely interesting way how these castes function, how they cohabit with each other, how movements. M.N. Srinivasan, a leading Indian sociologist who defined the terms Sanskritization and Westernization in terms of caste movements, a great book to read. And in fact, when you start reading all this, you understand a little bit more about societies, social evolutions, and so on and so forth. No uniform pattern of caste structure throughout. In fact, there is no uniform pattern of caste structure throughout India. So castes are different across states. In some states, a particular caste will be on a hierarchical higher pedestal, whereas in some states, they might be lower. Even today, there are thousands of castes in India with different names and nomenclature. Exists only 5 or 6 classes throughout the India. So classes are much less, castes are much more. They may include upper elite class, upper middle class, lower middle class. And we have heard this statement come multiple times that India has one of the largest middle classes in the world. In fact, a whole lot of businesses want to enter India because of this large middle class. Caste has an organic character, but class has a segmentary character. You are born into a caste, but you can change your class based on your occupation, your education, your movement, etc. In caste system, upper caste compete with each other for services of the lower caste, but in class system, lower classes compete with each other for the favor of the upper classes. So there's a lot of work which has been done into the caste system. In fact, obviously, world over, a lot of work has been done into the class system, and they both, kind of interact with each other in India. Caste system is characterized by cumulative inequality. A particular caste, which is the lower caste, is all defined as lower to the other castes. But class system is characterized by dispersed inequality. So you might be a middle class, but if you are a middle class and you are of a higher caste, you might be having a more social prestige than a middle class of a lower caste. So it becomes that more complicated. Class have similar socioeconomic status with relation to other classes, while members of a caste have either higher or lower ritual status. As I said, caste and class interact in myriad ways. I hope I'm not going too fast. In case I am, please tell me to slow down. Differ considerably between in fact, it differs considerably between the urban and the rural centers. In a metropolitan area, you normally don't even know who your neighbors are. If you are in a flats in a metropolitan area, you cannot choose your caste or class. Assuming you are in a fancy apartment, then obviously you are of the same class. You cannot choose your caste. But in a rural area, all these things become predominant. In both urban and the nexus and class influence the level of hierarchy of particular stratum. Also undergoing changes due to impact of technology innovation, modernization of agriculture, industrial and entrepreneurship development, political empowerment. The whole concept of reservation itself has done major movement and mobilization of lower castes. So every even political move has led to reorganization of political power. And that also determines the hierarchy, the social hierarchy in India. Revolution of mass media today, there is a news channel called Khabar Leheriya, which is run by a lower class, lower caste, and minority women in Bundelkhand, UP, and other regions. So that is itself an empowering feature. Today, social media becomes a very empowering feature for lower caste, lower class people. The policy of positive discrimination in favor of SC, ST, OBC has impacted significantly, bringing about social mobility, growth of professional entrepreneurship class in India due to rise of service sectors, has attributed to a changing structure of Indian society. So today, in an urban area, when you order food out of Zomato, you really can't have a choice in terms of whether the person is of a lower caste or a lower class, and you do not intermingle with those people. So there is certain amount of movement. In rural areas, it's still very different. Now, in terms of Indian diaspora, there were 5 waves of emigration. First 3 were the consequences of colonial rule. The last 2 forms were a result of post-colonial socio-economic development in India. We have done this, but let's quickly go through this again. Indentured system 34 ended in 20. Remember, indentured system also was a lot of force and deceit. So if you look at it in the definitions of human trafficking, it would very well fall into the trafficking area. There were 1.5 million Indians had been shipped to Africa, Asia, Caribbean. Today, Mauritius is completely Indian indentured labor. There are all these places which are completely Indian indentured labor. There was certain amount of mixing subsequently, but all these countries have Indian indentured labor. And then there were various socioeconomic strata as well as various religions, Hindus, Brahmins, middle class, artisan class, caste, agricultural, lower caste. They all were picked up and sent in ships as indentured labor. 16% represented higher caste, 32%. And we all know through various media, movies, and otherwise that it was very categorically said that when Indians traveled beyond the high seas, they would lose their caste. That was to deter people from leaving the shores. But the caste system was oppressive. People wanted to leave. Majority of them were young and male. And we also see that it was not just the lower caste, upper caste people also. And think about the fact there was a ritualistic, segregation between various castes. Now look at the fact an upper caste guy traveling with a lower caste guy in the same ship. In fact, I was telling the story of this Brahmin traveling with the lower caste people in a ship. When the ship, rolled and the food was mixed. Now, whether you eat or you do not eat is something. We still hear news items coming from various states about upper caste children not eating food prepared by the lower caste, cook, and so on and so forth. Roughly around the same time, another form of labor migration system called Kangani or Maistri system. Leaders directly recruited migrants from South India through a network of their own tea, coffee, and rubber plantation in Sri Lanka, Malaysia, and Burma. Burma is today Myanmar. I think Sri Lanka at that time was Ceylon. It subsequently changed its name. So here also there are a lot of people, Hindus who have gone. These are, almost indentured laborers. 5 million Indians, mostly poor Tamils, Hindus, migrated to these countries. Kangani and Maistras were generally higher caste. Considerable influence, they were banned in 38. Already so many people were dispersed across the world by the colonial British power. One of the major reasons for emigration was oppressive caste system, lack of social and economic mobility. So, when the British saw there was this economic, non-mobility, it was a very, a nice, deceitful way to say that you will come and work, you will get more status, this and that. And that's how, people were shipped out. Mass migration among workers from South India in the colonial period was due to higher casteism. And then that is one of the reasons why the Dravidian movement started in the South, especially Tamil Nadu, where, now we have two political parties, the DMK and the ADMK, which is the backward class movements, because the Brahmins were taking all the political and other positions. So remember, it is rewards. How resources are appropriated in terms of hierarchy. Passage immigration was also known as free immigration. Immigration of trading castes. We read in the caste system and the religious identity system how carpenters, the Ramgadiyas, were shipped by the British from India into East Africa. They went in and set up their own gurdwaras. And they are very prosperous out there. During and after Second World War, large number of Gujaratis and Punjabis moved to South Africa, Kenya, Tanzania. Ramgadiyas was typically in examples. We put it out in the caste system. How they were lower caste out here. When they went out there, they fought and created their own gurdwaras. Then, of course, there is brain drain, large-scale voluntary of highly skilled and educated professionals, India to developed nations of North America, Canada, Australia. 6 were early Indian immigrants who settled in Britain and North America. In fact, Sikhs today constitute almost 2.1% of the Canadian population, the largest, block of Sikhs outside India. The 5th form of Indian migration, labor immigration, emigration to West Asia, Asian countries in search of new opportunities. The Gulf migration, what is it called? Three waves of broad subsets of Indian diaspora, namely old diaspora, new diaspora, and the Gulf and other diaspora, constituted unskilled migrants, new diaspora, highly skilled migrants, Gulf. And now think about the fact that in all these migrations, now these migration comprises of various castes. And also we had seen in the last unit how, and the last to last unit, how when people move, it's not just a body which moves, but the whole cultural logistic which moves, the whole cultural component. So everything that you have learned while growing up in terms of endogamous units, in terms of hierarchies, in terms of culture, in terms of religion, moves with you. Now, earlier, it was impossible to practice the same because you were far, the communication was just not there, the transportation was just not there, you had no hope of coming back, and you were in a foreign land with foreign people, with a foreign culture, and you were acculturizing. You were already, in a different place. Today, those things have changed because there is 24/7 media, you are connecting in real time. You can come back with the faster means of transportation. You can come and go. So obviously, practicing your culture is much more easier than what was there during the indentured labor time. The new diaspora, the Gulf, and okay. Most of were aware about their religion, regional and caste-based origins, and personal identities are significantly affected by such awareness. Perpetuates in their tradition and practice, invariably maintains the economic strata which are deeply hierarchical. So, irrespective of the fact whether these guys were in India or they went out, they continue to carry forward the same cultural components. And that's why we see what is happening in the US and the Western countries today. Irrespective of the fact that they're in a Western culture, they still practice their Indian hierarchies and the Indian discrimination and so on and so forth. In the colonial diaspora is largely due to the history of indenture as entirely incompatible with ritual requirements and prohibition of caste system. Indenture itself an escape from caste atrocities, poverty. So it was a temporary feature. Impossible to adhere to ritual associated with caste, such as ceremonies, marriage, and festival. They were further. Those things have changed with globalization. Faster media, faster transportation. There is much more, meetings which are happening. Matthias, 2015, in a paper, The Land of the Wesh. Now, this becomes a in fact, this paper is available online. If you search it, you can find it. Caste structure and ideology in Mauritius. Remember, we had a major fracas with Mauritius some time back in terms of, influence, geopolitics at play. Mauritius is nothing but indentured labor from India. Incomplete and inconsistent register. And so when these people went there was this mix-up of caste names, subcaste names, because the British did not understand the caste system. So they mixed up registers, professions, and geographical, and candidates for indentured labor adopted individual strategies. In fact, when British started doing the caste census, whereby the caste identities became solidified, that time also people and communities practiced, individual strategies. That's how caste system became much more firmly entrenched because they realized this was a way of movement. And the British did not understand. They came in India and tried to govern a set of, conditions which they did not understand. Because of their ancestral access to land, some indentured laborers eventually settled in villages outside plantations, recreated the Indian social context. By the Second World War, half of the cultivated land in Mauritius was owned by descendants of indentured labor. It's a 73. Hazir Singh, 73, in a 73 paper. So if you read about Mauritius, there are new things which come about. Not explicitly formulated in Mauritian social relation, reality suggests there is silent reproduction of the caste-based social structure. So irrespective of the fact that what we read with South African diaspora, that they would frown down upon the rigid caste structures of India, they would still want to marry in that endogamous caste, relations, still want to get a Indian bride or a groom, and so on and so forth, inevitably cannot break that Indian yoke, in spite of the fact that they are South Africans now. Mauritian society follows the Indian Brahminical caste structure, based Varna, identified as Maharaj, Babuji, or Vaij. And that becomes the most interesting part. And these three are known as the Grand Nayasan, high caste, as opposed to T-Nasan, that is the low caste. So they might have changed the language, but the structures remain the same. As subtler classification of caste as Jatis, Khatri among Babuji, Ahir, Kurmi. This is what you would see in India. Ahir, Kurmi, Koiri. For example, Chamar is no longer used. It's used as a caste slur. Dusad or Nonia among the lower castes. All these castes are there. The same is there in the Mauritian society. Most Hindu sub-communities in Mauritius assemble in the social cultural association formed along caste lines, Gehlot Rajput, Mahasabha, Organization of Rajput caste, or Vaishya Mukti Sabha for Vaishya caste. In fact, the Arya Samaj, which went out there, also split along caste lines. See, inevitably, you can have an organization, but the organization is composed of people. People are not just bodies, they are composed of identities. That identity could be religious, could be caste. Uh, there are kinships, and everything works in those stratifications. New Indian diaspora caste system, which is covered obscurely in diaspora community, gets reflected in the form of prejudices and biases. Several examples of caste-based discrimination among new diasporas. United Nations, a Dalit man employed by Cisco, a technology company, filed a legal complaint, serious workplace harassment by his upper caste co-worker this is 2016, 21st century, in a Western environment. And in fact, when I searched media, CNN, South Asians say caste has proved hard to escape. So for whatever they were trying to escape in India, they recreate that in the US. Performance rating dropped to 2 levels now, except for an incident a month later with the dinner. So, and then there is no escape from caste. On these shores, untouchable from India's say. So these stories are there. These stories continue to come out. Research by Dalit Solidarity Network in UK-based Dalit advocacy group found that 85% of UK-based Dalits believe British Indians continue to follow the caste system. 50% of them had experienced some form of caste. So not only now there is racism they have to experience, they still continue to experience caste-based discrimination. Most Dalit diaspora, especially engineers in US, UK, don't want to reveal their caste because this happens in India too. Most of their Indian co-workers are from dominant caste. They fear that career prospects will be hampered if they reveal their caste identity due to prejudices. The prejudices continue, and prejudices we have seen travel from generation to generation. Like, for example, the culture travels from generation to generation, so do prejudices. Now, Dalit community is asserting their Dalit identity to protect their interests. Dalit movement, which was confined to Indian subcontinent, has broken national boundary, has reached international platforms. Educational and professional achievements of most Indian Nebrons are a reflection of their achieved status. Caste identities echoes their ascribed identity. Coming back to what we have been talking since the last couple of units in terms of identity. And identity becomes a major factor. In fact, in all our lives, identity becomes a major factor. How that identity shifts, where we take advantage of our identity, where we suppress a particular identity, where we put forward a different identity, inevitably it's the identity which comes forward. Brahmin Samaj of North America is the largest Brahmin organization with the sole objective of, and it's not the backward castes which mobilize and organize. The higher castes equally do. In fact, if you see again during this 2024 election, there are a whole lot of caste-based organizations which are supporting a particular party or opposing a particular political party. It almost seems that in the 21st century, there is a resurgence of caste, as we saw a resurgence of, and this is what we have also been talking across over all these units, that irrespective of the fact that we modernization was a way, or scientific thought was a way of taking over religion and the caste and the divisions, we've realized that these divisions have come forward in newer ways. There is an active negotiation between, on one hand, modernization, westernization, and the second hand, traditionalism. There is an active negotiation between scientific temper and faith-based, activities. Both seem to be negotiating to work together, and everybody is trying to prove which is better. And this shall continue. I think this is a part of humanness. It's a human construct. We cannot put anything right or wrong, because the fact is human being has his or her own basis to understand, make sense of the world. All these things are trying to make sense of the world. Basna provides a platform for you to meet and develop contacts with other members of the community. Matrimonial has been an important consideration in every community. And that's how the culture gets spread, the prejudices get spread, things move on. So matrimonials, in fact, if you pick up a newspaper or you go to any of the internet-based matrimonial sites, which is technology, a very Western concept, you will still see matrimonials divided by, in terms of caste, in terms of what are the cultural features. Canada PR, if you see top Canada PR firm, Hindu Brahmin, vegetarian girls preferred from US, Canada. So they're looking at a diaspora thing with the specific preferences. But that's the way it is. So this is
Sir?
Yeah, who's that?
Sir, Gurpreet.
Gurpreet, tell me.
Sir, the role of intercaste marriages with respect to social stratifications and migration. Because in US, Canada, there are quite a number of intercaste marriages too.
So inevitably, intercaste marriages are happening in India. Intercaste, interreligious marriages or interracial marriages are happening in the diaspora as well as in India. One would need to see what is the proportion of these marriages vis-a-vis the overall marriage scenario which is happening. Inevitably, irrespective of the rigid caste system which has been prevalent in India, intercaste marriage has always been a part of the system throughout history of the Indian caste system. So if you see, there always has been intercaste marriages. When we see in terms of the total number of them with respect to all marriages, they are a very small percentage. So, so remember the fact that smaller percentage, it's something like this. It's not that a poor class person or a poor person cannot achieve the highest education. Our ex-president, Dr. Abdul Kalam, came from a fishing community and went on to become a scientist and then a president. But the number of such people are far and fewer. To actually change a society in terms of culture, norms, moods, etc., require a much more larger mobilization, which is what is happening with these Dalit associations and now with other lower caste OBC associations. What typically happened in Tamil Nadu with the DMK and the ADMK, where now all political power is controlled in the hand of the lower caste, and the upper caste mostly went away and settled in North India and others. So you will find a lot of Tamil Brahmins in government jobs in Delhi and around. So this is definitely one of the way movement happens.
Gender and migration.
Hello.
Labor migration.
Sorry. Somebody said something? Okay, so this always was there, but the numbers are not enough to do some substantial change in the culture or the hierarchies of the system. Gurpreet?
Understood, sir.
Okay. Then, of course, there is a gender component. To add to the confusion, besides the class, caste, and other identities, there is the gender. Migration influences gender relation, either entrenching inequalities and traditional roles or challenging and changing them. Impact of migration for women and men depend on men. So it's the same thing. Are there enough women in workforce to affect changes in the way in a marriage, the man behaves at home vis-a-vis a working woman, or the working woman now works at the office and works at home. There is definitely a change. How much of the change is happening? So those negotiations are a continuous basis which are happening. The impact of migration for women and men depend on many factors. Now, Indian women, Indian educated working professional women, when she migrates, she's expected to work, she's expected to look at the home, and she's also expected to transmit the cultural norms. That becomes an additional pressure on the Indian women. And that affects how the gender works. Gender affects how migrants adapt to the new country, extent of contact with the original country, possibility of return and successful reintegration. Initial years of indentured women were considered. Now, again, that has also moved with the way the migration happened. Indentured women were considered unproductive. By 1886, demand increased because of lesser wages. They were fully integrated with the plantation economy. There are reference of several of them reached the level of Sirdarni or female supervisor in Mauritius. So again, if you see, irrespective of a rigid structure, there are leeways which happen. There are individuals who accost the system and do those changes. Many of these women, especially in Caribbean, became matriarchs of a large family. Chan writes that these matriarchs were assertive, walked freely in the streets, many smoked and even drank alcohol, but they were feared and respected for what they had achieved. Post-indentured period, when the number of women grew and patriarchal Indian practices were revived, many matriarchs tried to imbibe the very practices. So today, for example, we see a lot of modern women in a Western educated modern women, financially independent, having professional skills, also imbibe a lot of patriarchal characteristics because the largest socialization is patriarchal. So that's an active negotiation which happens in the society, where individuals challenge the system and the system challenges the individuals to conform, and the individuals challenge the system to change, and then a little changes happen. Okay, so let's sum up. Almost all societies are stratified according to wealth, power, prestige, and resources the societies value. System of stratification includes state societies, caste societies, class societies. Two major explanations of stratification are functionalists and conflict. So the functionalists believe the stratification is required for the society to function. In fact, the caste system, the advocates of the caste system always give this example that the caste system allows the Hindu society to function effectively. That's the functionalist definition. The conflict definition views that these systems are oppressive to the lower caste, and basically this is a way to oppress some people, and inevitably those people who are oppressed would need to rebel to come up. So these are the two views how the stratification is explained. Functionalist theory says stratification is necessary and inevitable. Conflict theory states that because of discrimination and prejudice against half-nots of society, caste and class are two different forms of stratification that coexist in India. And there are caste system is a form of determined by one single factor, ritualistic legitimation. Class is based on multiple factors like economic status, education, and more often than not in India, a lot of times the class and the caste kind of coexist. For example, the person of a higher caste will inevitably be a person of a higher class, because the caste person has appropriated political or other powers and has improved the class also. So this there is a lot of debate about reservations, so inevitably what typically happened is when there is this discussion about merit versus mediocrity, think about the fact a lower caste person inevitably does not have those resources. For example, when a middle class child is able to join a coaching course to get into IIT, a lower class guy or a lower caste guy does not have those resources. If he or she had those resources, then we could talk about merit. So these are various explanations and discussions which happen, and that's how it works out. There are some references: social stratification, D. Gupta, Hilda Cooper, Indian People Natal, and Prakash Jain, Emigration and Settlement of Indians Abroad. These are a part in your SLM. Again, as I said, if you people have not received your SLM, self-learning module, they are available on the net. You can download them as a PDF form. Okay, let me stop this share and open my video. Okay, hi. Any questions? If there are any questions, yes, Sean. You don't need to raise your hand. You can just say the question.
Okay, sir. So that's someone else speaking.
No, you are.
Okay.
Deepti's phone. Hang on. Let me just mute. Deepti's phone mic was on. Yes, Sean. Speak.
Okay, sir. So just one confusion. There was like a big jump. First, you said in among Caribbean women, they were considered what was the phrase? Unproductive labor. So that part I didn't get.
Oh, initially, when the indentured labor went from India, they were young males because these indentured labor were supposed to work in plantation and other areas which required hard manual labor. Now, inevitably, one of the discussion or one of the argument which has been put forward of unequal wages between men and women is that men are more productive than women. That argument has several flaws, but that is the argument put forward. And historically, it's always been felt that the men is superior in terms of force they are able to put than women. We know that that is not technically correct. But in the case of indentured labor, they wanted people who could work hard, and inevitably that would be young men. Women were supposed to be unproductive. For example, in the Indian institution of marriage, the whole concept of dowry came in because it's a whole story as to how the concept of dowry came in. But some in substance was it's the man which goes out and does economic activity, and the women's household work was not considered an economic activity. So if a woman goes from a household where she's a liability because she's a economic unit, she's not producing any economic activity into a household, then she's a liability which should be compensated with a dowry. Chong?
Okay, sir. Got it. And then, but how did the jump happen to them becoming matriarchs before patriarchy took over again?
So again, the point is when these women went out, a lot of these women, see again, individuals are all different. So irrespective of the fact, and there are certain individuals which challenge the system. So when these women would have gone out there, some of these much more challenging women would have acquired land, as we saw in the case of Mauritius. They would have been hard workers. They would have political acumen and would have become matriarchs in the course of evolution. But when more women came in and the patriarchy norms started coming in, they turned into patriarchy generative system. For example, look at in India. In India, the festival of Karwa Chauth is a very Punjabi rural festival. However, today we see women from Bengal, Orissa, UP, and various other states doing Karwa Chauth. If you go through the story of Karwa Chauth, is an extremely patriarchal festival. It's an extremely patriarchal rural agriculture festival. So how did the modern educated women from outside Punjab started doing that? A certain amount of materialism, a certain amount of consumerism, a certain amount of capitalism and a certain amount of patriarchy. Chong?
Yes, sir. So consumerism,
Yes, what about consumerism?
no, how is it related to consumerism? Sorry, I'm
Because, so see, capitalism, what is the capitalism model? About capital, about goods. Consumer is that
Mhm,
people are consuming various goods. So, for example, today, Karva Chauth is looked as a time when there is a gift given from the husband to the wife because she's keeping a fast for his health.
mhm.
So there is consumerism because I want a gift, I want gold, I want
Okay,
a dress.
okay,
there
got it.
is there is a consumerist possibly, and it's all surrounded by capitalist model of selling of goods, of capital moving.
Okay, sir, got it. So just a bit interested in how, like you uh, gave a good summary about how the women they gain political power, but just wondering how they did that. So if
Chong,
there's any reference.
I can find it out. So there are so as I said, this article on that Vash in Mauritius is available
Mhm.
online. So in
Okay.
case you are looking, I think I have downloaded. If you send me a mail on my mail ID, let me send you my mail ID on the chat. In fact, I always say that in case you want the PPT or any other link, you can send me a mail. That's my mail ID. If you send me
Okay.
a mail, I can send you the article.
Okay, sure. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. So in fact, I'm not, as I keep saying, I'm not on WhatsApp. So if you people come across any, article, any research paper, any news item on whatever we are talking about, you can share it in your WhatsApp group. Idea is that multiple perspectives always help us in being able to understand a topic better. A topic has multiple perspective always. What typically I do is I am picking up your SLM, your self-learning module, which IGNU has given, and making the PPT with that in areas where I feel that SLM is not able to explain well, or the explanation does not, would need more explanation. I pick up content from outside. For example, this Mauritius, research paper, there was a mention in your SLM. Then I went and read that paper and picked up some more aspects of the paper. And I put it out there, especially the news item from the US. So I add up all those content to be able to get you to understand. I was wondering if we can find all time to have an online and discuss our plans to the current. Yes, absolutely. So Shrestha is writing something. You guys can interact on your group, on your official group or your unofficial group. I'm sure you have an unofficial group in all my various places where I teach. All students have an unofficial group where you guys can share information, share articles, talk to each other. These networks are what typically helps in being able to understand topics and take things forward. Okay, great. Thanks, Reshta. Any other question?
Sir,
Yes, Gurpreet.
sir, other than the caste, which is another dominating factor determining the social stratification?
In India or
And where is
otherwise?
the role of education? Where is the
So,
role of education, sir? Role
see,
of education.
so inevitably, when we look at India, there are multiple things which work in terms of an identity, Indian identity. So, as I keep saying, what is my identity? My identity is based on possibly my designation, possibly my religion, possibly my caste, possibly the area that I live in, possibly in terms of being a father, being a husband, being a son, various identities which typically work out. When I am going out into a social forum, or when people are looking at me, they determine my identity. When they say, oh, you are a Chawla, that means you are a Punjabi. Now that has become my identity. So if I was to join a Punjabi forum in Haryana, then I, get into the Punjabi network identity. Then, in terms of that, the Punjabi would be in terms of a Punjabi Sikh or a Punjabi Hindu. You
Sir.
see, the identities themselves are much more segregated or stratified. For example, in Haryana, they had in the last 2 terms a Punjabi chief minister, whereas Haryana typically had a Jat, chief minister. So, that political power. So, typically the stratification is based on multiple things: power, prestige, wealth.
Sure.
But here, multiple identities come in. So there is a class I work with, and there's a caste I work with. Two parallel things which exist. More often than not, the caste and the class juxtapose. Higher caste people will more often be higher class too, though there are exceptions. Similarly, a lower caste person will more often be lower class too, though there are exceptions. So these two predominantly, and into all, and remember, the caste system is a Hindu thing, but caste also now is in Sikhism, in Islam, in Christianity. So, and that's how you keep negotiating, and that's where networks come in, the network identity. Gurpreet?
Thank you, sir.
Any other question? Okay, so if there is no other question, we'll call it a day. You have a wonderful weekend and a wonderful week here. Next week, we come and meet again at 3 o'clock with the next unit in this SLMs, and we'll take it on from there. Have a wonderful Saturday and Sunday then. Bye, guys.